Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Monumental Trivia Live. If you're watching this on the replay, feel free to play along and keep your own score. Then leave a comment and let me know how many of the questions you got right and which ones you thought were the most challenging. I want to start by giving a shout out to CrowdPurr, who gave me a chance to use their game platform for this game. So check out the video description if you want a link to run your own trivia game here on YouTube or elsewhere. If you don't know who I am, my name is Rob. I'm the founder of Trip Hacks DC Tours and the host of today's trivia game. And in normal times, we have a tour called Monumental Trivia, where you get to go around and see the monuments and memorials and compete for the title of Trivia Champ. But since Washington, D.C. is closed due to the global pandemic, we are doing it online instead. So I'm going to switch over to the game view now. And if you haven't registered yet, head over to triphacksdc.com/trivia if you would like to play live. We've still got a few spots left in the game if you want to get in on it live. And I should mention that if you at any time have a technical difficulty, refresh your browser or your device. We do have to play on ultra low latency mode on YouTube because we want to have the smallest possible lag between the time I read the question and when they pop up on your game controller. So sometimes that does cause a bit of a glitch, and if that happens, refresh your browser and it should take care of it. So like I said before, the first question in our game is going to be a practice question. And then after that, we're going to get into the tour and do the real questions. So let me go ahead and start the game. So here's our practice question. It is, what is the name of the building where the Senate and House of Representatives meets? So we'll start the timer now. You get 20 seconds per question. Remember that every second delay, you lose 1 point. Now, the choices for this one are the Parliament Building, the National Assembly Building, the Capitol Building, or the White House. So where is the place where the Senate and House of Representatives meets? Okay, time's up. 100% of you guys said the Capitol Building, which is off to a very good start because that is the correct answer. The Capitol Building is the name of the building where the House of Representatives and the Senate meets, and a very popular spot when you come to Washington, D.C. and see the sights. So well done to everyone. This is how the game is going to go. And so we only had 54 answers there. So if you registered and you missed that one, hopefully you've gotten back from getting your beverage and you're ready to go because we are going to jump into the real questions now. And we're going to start our tour at the Jefferson Memorial. So Thomas Jefferson, one of our founding fathers, his memorial is the farthest away from most of the sites on the National Mall. That's why when we do the tour in real life, we start over here at the Jefferson Memorial. But it is an excellent memorial when you get to see it in real life. So our first question here at the Jefferson Memorial is, how many terms did Thomas Jefferson serve as president? And the choices are pretty simple. Was it 1 term, 2 terms, half of a term, or he wasn't president? So Thomas Jefferson, founding father, was he president? And if he was, how many terms did he serve? Okay, time is up. And the most guessed answer was 2 terms, followed by 1 term. And the correct answer is 2 terms. Now, Thomas Jefferson had an interesting path to his presidency because he was John Adams' vice president. And then he ran against John Adams. And if you're thinking, well, hold on a second, why would the vice president run against his own president? Well, the answer is that back then things were a little bit different. And the original idea for the Electoral College is that they would choose both the president and the vice president, and that typically the person who got the most votes would be president, and the loser would be the vice president. Now, that system didn't work out very well and obviously didn't last very long, but that is how the vice president wound up beating his own president, and Thomas Jefferson became the 3rd president and then served out 2 terms. So well done if you got 2 terms on that question. 60% got that one right. Let's go to the next one, which is, what was Thomas Jefferson's favorite alcoholic beverage? And the choices are beer, wine, hard cider, or gin and tonic. So if you tuned in last time, you remember there was a question about Thomas Jefferson's favorite non-alcoholic beverage. But what was his favorite alcoholic beverage? And depending on which historian you ask, perhaps his favorite beverage at all. All right, time is up. And, ooh, we've got a brutal question right here. So, Thomas Jefferson's favorite beverage was wine. And you might know that if you remember that Thomas Jefferson was a big Francophile. He was a huge fan of all things French, including fine French wines. In fact, one of the reasons why Thomas Jefferson had some of the money problems that he did was because he spent so much money on wine. He was a big fan of it. And wine is a big part of the Charlottesville, Virginia wine country, which is where Monticello is located, Thomas Jefferson's home. So when you go to Virginia and you tour Virginia wine country, you will wind up in Charlottesville around Monticello. Thomas Jefferson, a big fan of wine. All right, didn't expect a brutal question so early, but those beverage questions are getting everybody. So our final question at the Jefferson Memorial is, where did Thomas Jefferson's personal book collection end up? And the choices are the Library of Congress, the New York Public Library, the University of Virginia Library, or the D.C. Public Library. So Thomas Jefferson was quite a well-read founding father, and he owned a lot of books. But his personal book collection wound up in which of these places? Okay. 67% said the Library of Congress. That is the correct answer. And the hint, if you've ever visited the Library of Congress, is that the main building is called the Jefferson Building, named after Thomas Jefferson. And you can go into this room right here, and you can see Thomas Jefferson's book collection. Now, this is not a full collection for reasons I won't get into in this video. Some of the books are missing, and you'll see placeholders. And if you happen to own one of those books and want to be a hero to the Library of Congress, you can contact them and see if you can add it to this book collection. So let's go to the leaderboard and see what the score is looking like after round one. Chops is in first place, 59 points, which means that Chops has gotten all three questions right and almost in perfect time. So that is very impressive. Well done there. How's everybody feeling? The brutal question was a bit of a tough one. The beverage questions are getting everybody, but sounds like everybody's having fun. And there is still plenty of game to go. So don't worry if you are a little behind now. There's still plenty of game to go. And remember, we're not just playing for first, but we're playing for 10th place as well. So let's move on to the second stop on our tour, which is the World War II Memorial. I wish I was over at the World War II Memorial on a beautiful day like today, when it looks kind of like this. Today is an excellent day to visit a memorial like this one. So let's go to our first question at the World War II Memorial, which is, what is the centerpiece of the memorial design? This one's a total giveaway if you are paying any attention at all to the photo I just showed on the transition. Anyway, the choices are a flower garden, a sand dune, a rock pile, or a water fountain. So what is the centerpiece of the World War II memorial design? Okay, I hope it's 100% on this one. It's close. 96% said a water fountain. And of course, remember, it's that big, beautiful water fountain in the middle of the memorial that makes up the centerpiece of the design. One of the reasons why they chose water for the centerpiece of the memorial is because at the end of World War II, American troops and our allies celebrated the end of the war by splashing around in the fountains in the parts of the world where they were stationed. So well done if you got that one. We'll go to the second question now, which is, which former politician and World War II veteran used to visit the World War II Memorial regularly and greet his fellow veterans? The choices for this one are Ulysses S. Grant, John McCain, Bob Dole, or Ronald Reagan. So one of these men used to visit the World War II Memorial on a regular basis. We would see him as tour guides, get to talk to him, take photos with him. Who was it? All right. 46% said the correct answer, Bob Dole. Now, the trick to this one is that only one of these 4 people was a World War II veteran. John McCain was a Vietnam War veteran, and so you could occasionally see him at the Vietnam War Memorial. Not as often as Bob Dole visited the World War II Memorial, but in any case, Bob Dole was senator from Kansas, and if you're old enough, you might remember that he ran for president in the 1996 election on the Republican ticket. He ran against Bill Clinton. Unsuccessfully. Bill Clinton was a 2-term president, but he is a lawyer and he lives in Washington, D.C., and does visit the World War II Memorial, not nearly as frequently as he did when it opened in 2004, but us tour guides did get to see him there when he visited. All right, last question at the World War II Memorial. How many total columns are around the World War II Memorial? And the choices are 50, 56, 76, or 100. So if you remember the photo, there are columns all around the memorial on the outside. How many total are there? All right, let's see what everybody thought. I'm surprised. No brutal question on this one. The correct answer is 56. And so well done if you got 56. Now, the reason there are 56 is not at random or by accident. It's because they represent the 48 states and 8 territories in the U.S. during World War II. And if you're wondering what those territories are, these are the list of them. And you might look at this and say, wait a second, Alaska and Hawaii, those are states. And the Philippines is a different country. Well, Alaska and Hawaii and the Philippines were all territories of the U.S. during World War II. Alaska and Hawaii became states in 1949, 4 years after World War II ended. So let's load to the leaderboard and see who's on top now. After round 2, Chops is still running a good game, but Dave is in second place, only 3 points behind, and Jeff is only a point behind Dave too, so still anybody's game. And remember, we're not just playing for first, but we're playing for 10th place as well. So plenty of game still to go. Alan says, I'm Chops. So good job, Alan. Keep it up, although you've got plenty of competition sneaking up on you there. So 6 memorials still to go on our tour, including the next one, which is the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. All right, first question here is, where was Martin Luther King assassinated in 1968? And the choices are Dallas, Memphis, Atlanta, or Huntsville. If you're a subscriber to Walter's World, you've got an advantage on this one because they published a video featuring this exact spot just last week. All right, time is up. 78% said Memphis. Well done. The correct answer is Memphis. This is the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, Tennessee, at the former Lorraine Motel. And so when you go to Memphis, and I highly recommend you do if you get a chance, make sure to stop by the National Civil Rights Museum, a very, very important part of our country's history. So well done to everyone who got that one. The next question at the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial is, he was the youngest person at the time to win what award? The choices are the Pulitzer Prize, the Nobel Peace Prize, an Academy Award, or the Atlanta Chamber of Commerce Award. So Martin Luther King at the time was the youngest person to win which of these 4 awards? All right, time's up. And 88% said the Nobel Peace Prize. Well done. The correct answer is Nobel Peace Prize. So Martin Luther King was 35 years old when he received the award. Now, there have been younger award winners since him, but at the time, he was the youngest person to win the award, which was quite an accomplishment, not just for him, but because he was the youngest person to do it at that time as well. So well done if you knew that one. We've got one more question here at the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial, which is, What event delayed the dedication of the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial in August 2011? And the choices are a hurricane, an earthquake, a government shutdown, or a blizzard. So in August 2011, the president was scheduled to come to the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial, give a little speech, cut the yellow ribbon with the big scissors, and it couldn't happen on time because of which of these? All right, we've got a brutal question here. Government shutdown seems like a plausible answer because we have so many of them in recent history, but the correct answer is a hurricane. So this was a tricky one because 2011 we had both an earthquake and a hurricane in Washington, D.C. The earthquake messed up the Washington Monument, but the hurricane delayed the dedication of the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. It was Hurricane Irene. It was a big one. It hit Puerto Rico pretty hard. It came up the East Coast, hit North Carolina, Delaware, New Jersey, New York, and then it went up into Canada. But it did skirt past Washington, D.C., and because it was so huge, as you can see from the photo, it caused some damage here and delayed the dedication of the memorial. So it was dedicated, but not on time. All right, let's see who's on top. Dave has moved into the lead. Chops, I don't know which one you got wrong, but you've lost the lead there. So we've still got a good game going and very competitive. So it's still anybody's game. We've got 5 more memorials still to go on the tour. And so I think I'm feeling good for everybody's chances here. Andy says every question's a brutal question. I don't know, Andy. I think the MLK questions, the first 2, I think were pretty easy. So try to mix up some easier ones and some tougher ones. But Dave currently doing quite well there in the lead. So we will go now to our next stop on the tour, which is the Korean War Memorial. One of my personal favorites. And if you've ever taken a real-life tour with me, you know that I say that it is perhaps the most underappreciated memorial on the National Mall. Big fan of it. So let's go into the first question here, which is, what is the official name of South Korea? And the choices are the Democracy of Korea, the Commonwealth of Korea, Republic of Korea, or Democratic People's Republic of Korea. So South Korea is what we call it and what we typically hear about it called in the news, but it has an official name. Which of these is it? All right. 52% said Republic of Korea. Well done. It is called the Republic of Korea. If you said Democratic People's Republic of Korea, I'm afraid I have to inform you that you mixed up North and South Korea. North Korea is called the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. So, oops. This is the flag of South Korea, or the Republic of Korea, as it's called. You probably recognize it, especially if you watched the Olympics, the Winter Olympics, a few years ago. You probably saw this flag quite a bit. So South Korea is the Republic of Korea. Next question is, which of these was one of the most prevalent injuries among American soldiers during the Korean War? And the choices are Agent Orange exposure, stab wounds, snake bites, or frostbite. So during the Korean War, American soldiers suffered from one of these more than the others. Which one was it? Okay, 48% said frostbite, which is correct. I'm glad I didn't have to do a brutal question on that one. Frostbite is the correct answer. The Korean Peninsula has very extreme climate, and the winters are brutally cold, and a lot of American soldiers were simply not prepared or equipped for the winters that they experienced in Korea. And so if you visit the Korean War Memorial on a hot, humid July day, you're not getting a great appreciation for what these guys dealt with. You would really want to visit on a cold winter day, perhaps when there's a bit of snow or ice covering the statues. They are obviously in winter gear in the memorial, and that is because frostbite was such a prominent injury. All right, one more question to go at the Korean War Memorial, and it is, what year was a peace treaty signed between North and South Korea? And the choices are 1953, 1975, 2016, or a peace treaty was never signed. So North and South Korea, they fought what we call the Korean War for 3 years, and they signed a peace treaty when? All right, 66% said a peace treaty was never signed, which is the correct answer. If you said 1953, you're on the right path. There was a ceasefire in 1953. That's when they stopped fighting. But a peace treaty was never signed, which means that North and South Korea are still officially at war with each other. Now, that's very confusing to some people because they said, well, wait a second. A few years ago, I watched the Olympics, and I saw them flying this white flag with the blue Korean peninsula on it. And that's called the Korean Unification Flag, and that is for the idea that one day perhaps North and South Korea can be at peace and can be reunited. But officially, the two countries are still at war, which is why the Olympics was a bit of an odd time when it comes to Korean politics, if you follow them. All right, now that we are halfway through, let's take a look at the leaderboard. And Jeff has moved into the top spot. Well done, Jeff. Chops is making a comeback. Dave, you're slipping. So keep up the good work, everybody. I see a lot of good scores here. So remember, we're not just playing for first, but we're playing for 10th. And I feel like anybody could hit that at this point. Very, very close scores here. So keep up the good work to everyone. We are going to move on to our next stop, which is the Franklin Delano Roosevelt Memorial. Franklin Delano Roosevelt Memorial is the biggest memorial, square footage-wise, of all of the memorials on the tour. When we do the tour in real life, we have the most trivia questions at this one just because it's simply the largest. So let's go to the first question here for the FDR Memorial. And it is, which world event happened when FDR was president? And your choices are women get the right to vote, Black Tuesday stock market crash, Pearl Harbor bombing, or Sputnik 1 launch. So these are for world events, but only one of them happened when FDR was the president. All right, let's see what we've got. 74% said the Pearl Harbor bombing. Well done. That is the correct answer. The Black Tuesday stock market crash happened in 1929. Herbert Hoover was the president then. Now, there is a relationship to FDR, which is that the stock market crash started the Great Depression, and one of the reasons why FDR won in a landslide in the 1932 election was because of the Great Depression. But the Pearl Harbor bombing happened when FDR was president. There on the left, he's giving his famous Day That Will Live in Infamy speech, and on the right, he is signing the declaration of war against Japan, and that was the U.S. beginning to get involved officially in World War II. So well done if you knew that one. We'll go to the second question here, which is, where was the place that FDR called the Little White House? The choices are Cape Cod, the Hamptons, Warm Springs, or Hawaii. So many presidents have a second location where they like to go. That's outside of the White House. FDR called his the Little White House. Where was it located? All right, brutal. The Hamptons is the one that makes the most sense because FDR was from New York, but the place that he called the Little White House was Warm Springs in Georgia. And that's also where he passed away in 1945. He did spend quite a bit of time at Warm Springs in those later years. And so if you ever get a chance to go to Warm Springs in Georgia, it is an excellent historic site. And if you're into the presidents, I highly recommend it. All right, that was a brutal question, but we'll see if the next one is a little bit easier. It is, what was the name of FDR's signature economic program? And the choices are Roosevelt Care, Reconstruction, New Society, or New Deal. So remember that stock market crash happened in 1929, started the Great Depression, and FDR had an economic program that he promised would help to get America out of it. What was it called? All right, 84% said New Deal. Well done, 84%. New Deal is the correct answer. So the New Deal had a lot of different components. One of its purposes was banking reforms, because if you remember, the stock market crash caused all kinds of banking problems because people ran to the bank and stood in line like this to withdraw all their money because they thought the bank was going to go out of business and that the bank was going to take all their money. So banking reforms was a big part of it, and public works was a big part of it as well, building power plants, utilities across America. The Tennessee Valley Authority, a big part of that. The Civilian Conservation Corps, a big part of that. So the New Deal did a lot of things, but it was the name of FDR's program. So let's take a look at the leaderboard. Dave moved back into first. I love the back and forth here with Jeff and Chops still in the top 3, but I see a ton of scores clumped together right around that 10th place mark. So remember, we're not just playing for first, but we're playing for 10th as well. All right, looks like Mark Walters has jumped in here as well. I think Jocelyn is in the running for 10th place. Looks like everybody else is pretty much clumped in there too. But the top spot, I like this competition between Dave, Jeff, and Chops. So keep up the good work, everyone. We are going to go on to our next stop on the tour, which is the Vietnam War Veterans Memorial. So we have Memorial Day coming up in a couple of weeks, and normally Memorial Day is when a lot of veterans come to visit the Vietnam War Memorial. Unfortunately, I think that will not happen this year. It will be a much quieter experience than typical. But let's go into the first question, which is, what color is the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall? Now, I feel like this one is another giveaway. If you're paying any attention whatsoever to the transition slide I just showed, you know the answer to this. The choices are white, black, bronze, or red. So the Veterans Memorial Wall is made out of granite stone, which is what color? 95% said black. Very observant. The Vietnam Veterans Wall is made out of black stone. And if you've ever gone up close, you know that it's black stone. It's also reflective. You can see the reflections of the trees, the monuments, even yourself. And so it is quite a powerful experience for the folks who visit the wall. All right. This one I think is a little bit tougher. We'll see. When they perform a reading of the names on the wall, approximately how long does it take to read? The choices are 1 day, 3 days, 10 days, or a month. So if you know how many names are on the wall, that's a good start. But then you have to calculate how long it takes to read a name and multiply it by that number. Or you could just guess. All right, 73% said 3 days, which is the correct answer. There are a little bit more than 58,000 names on the Vietnam Wall, which means that if you do a little under 20,000 per day, that you can get them read in about 3 days. Now, the last time they did a reading of the names was on a Veterans Day a few years ago, and I will say that it was quite an experience as a tour guide, because I went there on the first day and they were reading names, and I came back 24 hours later and they were still reading names, and I came back 24 hours later and they were still reading names. So it's hard to appreciate that if you don't experience it in that way, but it really goes to show how many people didn't make it back from the Vietnam War. So well done if you knew the answer to that question. We've got one more to go here at the Vietnam Memorial, which is, the Vietnam Memorial has 3 main components: the Veterans Memorial Wall, which we just saw, the 3 soldiers, and what? And the choices are the Vietnam Women's Memorial, the Vietnam Seniors Memorial, the Vietnam Draftees Memorial, or the Vietnam Service Dogs Memorial. So when you come on the real life tour, we will go to 3 spots: the wall, the 3 soldiers, and what? All right, 77% said the Women's Memorial. 18% said the Service Dogs Memorial. I don't know if you're just joking around at this point or if you thought there was one. That would be interesting if there was. But the Vietnam Women's Memorial is the correct answer. So the Vietnam Women's Memorial was added because there are 8 women's names on the Vietnam Wall. They were nurses in the Army and Air Force, and the Women's Memorial depicts 3 nurses tending to an injured soldier. And it's important. It's an important part of the memorial because we typically remember the soldiers who served in the Vietnam War, but the military has a lot of people who go to war and to support the military. So we want to remember everybody, and that is why the Vietnam Women's Memorial is there. So let's take a look at the leaderboard and see who's up top. Dave is still in the lead, along with Jeff and Chops, but I see a lot of people in the running for those next few spots, so keep up the good work. We've still got 2 more memorials to go on the tour, so we'll have to see who winds up in that 10th place. Don't worry if you're feeling like you haven't gotten too many. There's still plenty of time left to go. So be quick and be right. You can gain ground. All right, we're going to go on to the next step on our tour, which is the Washington Monument, the oldest monument in the city, the tallest building in the city, and a very cool place to be. It did reopen and then closed again because of the pandemic. So unfortunate that we had a very brief window when you could go in it again, and now it's closed again, just like it was for most of the 2010s, which you know if you visited. All right, so our first question here is, what is the name of George Washington's home in Virginia? And the choices are Monticello, Mount Vernon, Montpelier, or the Washington Ranch. So you can visit George Washington's historic home in Virginia, but you should probably find out what the name of it is first. Okay, 98% said Mount Vernon. I think that this was the easiest question so far. Well done, because Mount Vernon is the correct answer. Now, last time we played, we talked about Thomas Jefferson's home, which is Monticello, but George Washington's home is Mount Vernon. And Mount Vernon is interesting because it's a historic site, but it's not run by our government, which means that during a government shutdown, you can still go. And on Christmas, when everything else is closed, you can still go. And a very good place to go if you're a George Washington history buff or just interested in George Washington in general. So Mount Vernon, well done to everyone who got that. The next question here is, which river is General Washington most famous for crossing? And the choices are the Mississippi River, the Potomac River, the Delaware River, or the Hudson River. So, which river is General George Washington the most famous for crossing? Okay, 82% said the Delaware, which is good because that is correct. The Potomac is where Mount Vernon is located. The Mississippi and the Hudson are elsewhere, so I'm glad nobody picked those. But you have probably seen the famous painting of George Washington, General Washington, leading the ragtag group of colonial troops across the Delaware River. It was on Christmas or the day after Christmas, depending on exactly what time you pinpoint it. And you can see the icy waters in this famous painting. And so George Washington crossing the Delaware is the location of the famous painting. All right. One more question to go at the Washington Monument, which is, what political party did George Washington belong to? And the choices are the Democratic Republican, the Federalist, the Whig, or none. So George Washington was the first president. What political party did he represent back in the 1700s? Okay, 48% said none, which is correct. George Washington was the only president in U.S. history who was not a member of a political party. And the reason for that is because George Washington was not a politician, and he actually didn't really enjoy being one. So the reason he was the first president is because the early Americans basically begged him to be the first president, and he agreed to do it. But he was not a member of a political party, and one of the traditions that he started was the president's cabinet. And he had people in his cabinet from different political parties, which, if you're familiar with the story of Hamilton, you know that caused a lot of tension between people like Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson because they had very different political beliefs. So the tradition of having a cabinet is maintained to this day, but it is quite a bit different than it was back in George Washington's day. So well done if you knew that George Washington was not in a political party. We'll take a look at the leaderboard, and we will see that Jeff is pulling out ahead. So Chops and Dave, got to be quick. And we've got one more stop to go. So I think any of these people could come out on top. And we're still going for that 10th place as well. Remember, if we have a tie, we're going to do a tiebreaker after the fact. I'm going to flip a coin. So hopefully we don't need to, but we've got one more stop left to go on the tour. Oh, yes. Mount Vernon is doing some cool virtual stuff right now. Let's see. Jocelyn, go to triphacksdc.com/trivia to get back into the game. Crowd per button seem to be getting mixed up. Well, can't diagnose technical glitches right now. Hopefully you have a device that's letting you pick the option that you want to pick. But looks like Jeff, Chops, and Dave are all getting them and in the running for first. So we will go to the final stop on our tour, the crowd pleaser, the most visited site in all of Washington, D.C. You know I'm talking about the Lincoln Memorial. So this is the spot where you will probably remember more than any other when you come to Washington, D.C. Famous location. So we've got 3 questions, and then we will declare the Trip Hacks DC Trivia Champ. All right, the first question is, which of these speeches is carved inside the Lincoln Memorial? And the choices are A House Divided, I Have a Dream, Gettysburg Address, or Give Me Liberty and Give Me Death. So there are 2 speeches carved inside the Lincoln Memorial. One is Lincoln's second inaugural speech, and the other one is what? All right, 93% said Gettysburg Address. That's correct. Very well done. The Gettysburg Address is the famous Civil War speech. It's also famous because it's extremely short. Written out in cursive like this, you can fit the whole thing on just 2 pages, basically. It only takes a few minutes to read the whole speech, and so at the time, some people found it surprising that someone as important as President Abraham Lincoln would give a speech that was so short. Didn't he have more to say? Well, it's now one of the best-known speeches in all of U.S. history. So well done if you knew about the Gettysburg Address. Next question is, the Lincoln Memorial is based on the Parthenon, which is located in which country? And the choices are Italy, Turkey, Egypt, or Greece. So if you've ever been to the Parthenon, you know where it is. There's a Parthenon in Nashville, Tennessee. It's a replica. It's based on the real Parthenon in which of these countries? Okay, 87% said Greece, which I'm happy about because you are correct. Italy is the other good choice. The Greco-Roman architecture can be seen. The Jefferson Memorial is based on the Pantheon, which is in Italy, but the Parthenon is located in Athens, Greece, and it's at the top of this big hill, which is one of the reasons why the Lincoln Memorial has that giant staircase in front of it, is because they wanted to recreate the feeling of climbing this big hill when you go to the Parthenon. So well done if you knew about where the Parthenon is located, which leads into our final question, which is, the Lincoln Memorial is depicted on which dollar bill? And the choices are the $1 bill, the $5 bill, the $10 bill, or the $50 bill. So everybody's scrambling for their wallets right now to check which bill the Lincoln Memorial is located on. If you know which bill has Abraham Lincoln's face on it, then you can probably guess which one has the Lincoln Memorial on it. All right, 81% said the $5 bill, and you are correct. So the $5 bill has Abraham Lincoln on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. So if you want to do one of those cool photos where you fold the bill in half and take half of it as the dollar and half of it as the Lincoln Memorial, you can do that when you visit. And the $1 bill has the famous all-seeing eye on it. Thought more people might say the 1, but the 5 is the one with the Lincoln Memorial on it. So before we go into the final scoreboard and see who came in first and who came in 10th, I just want to say thank you for everyone who tuned in. We had 74 total players. I think a few people might have dropped out, but I want to say congratulations to everyone. It looks like all the scores are quite good, and I'm impressed that you did so well. So if you are watching and you haven't done this already, please go ahead and give this video a big thumbs up so that I know that you had fun. And if you want to play again after the video is over, come back when it's posted as a real YouTube video and leave a comment and let me know. I wasn't planning to do another trivia game because I was hoping that we would be out giving tours again soon, but it looks like that will not be the case. So if you want to do it as virtual trivia again, just let me know and I can decide if we'll play again. Or if you have suggestions for a different type of trivia game, like neighborhood trivia or presidential trivia. We don't have to do monumental trivia every time. So just make sure to come back, leave me a real comment, not a YouTube live chat, and let me know. So with all of that said, let's go to the leaderboard and say congratulations to Jeff for being this week's Trip Hacks DC Trivia Champ. 23 out of 25 questions correct. So that includes the practice question, but that is awfully impressive, if I may say. All right, and let's let it swing around and see who claimed the 10th place spot when we get to it, or if we had a tie. But Jeff, I will be in touch to discuss whether you want the Trip Hacks DC t-shirt or the gift card for a future tour. And it looks like Jack is all alone in 10th place with 337 points. So congratulations, Jack. I will be in touch soon. And Mark Finley with the super chat. Really appreciate that. Thank you for coming and playing today, Mark. And thank you for everyone else who came along. I'll hang out in the live chat and keep this open for 5 more minutes while I finish my iced coffee. And if you want to chat, you can stick around. Otherwise, thanks again for tuning in. And as I always say, enjoy your trip.